So this term so far in Year 9 we've been doing the Constitution, and that's kind of the rules from Australia. So they were produced in 1901 when we did Federation. So we were 6 colonies. Each colony answered directly to Britain, and then in 1901 we became Australia, we became federated, and we wrote the Constitution, and the Constitution was needed in order to become the overarching rules for how Australia would run. So the Australian Constitution talks about the Australian Parliament. It says what the Australian Parliament will do. We call that the federal government or the federal parliament or the Commonwealth government. There's lots of different words we actually call that. The Constitution also tells us about the Senate and the House of Reps. These are the houses within the Australian Parliament. So the Australian Parliament is divided into the House of Representatives and the Senate. Additionally, the Constitution talks about the High Court. Now, the reason why the Constitution talks about that is because we have separation of powers. We have the Parliament, we have the Executive, and we have the Judiciary. Judiciary is like judge, so it's the courts. And the High Court is the highest court, and the reason why we have that is because it actually monitors the Constitution. So if people don't like something and they think it's wrong under the Constitution, then the High Court will actually make a decision on that. And it's the High Court that makes that decision, not the Parliament. The Constitution also talks about the monarch, which is the Queen at the moment, and the Queen is actually guided by what she can do under the Constitution. The Constitution also refers to the powers of the state government and what the state government can do that's different from what the Australian Parliament can do. So that's an important thing. The other thing that we've also talked about, which is not in the Constitution, is local government, because we have 3 levels of government. We've got the top level, we've got the state government, and then we've got local government. And different governments make different laws for different things. So the Australian government technically comes under the House of Reps, and it's the party that has the most seats in the House of Reps. So that's 76 because there's 150 seats in the House of Representatives. And so if you get 76 as the party with the most seats, then you get to form government. So there are lots of different parties in the Australian government. There are 2 primary parties in Australia, the Coalition or the Liberal Party and the National Party. They come together to form what's called the Coalition, and the Labor Party. So here you can see more easily the 3 tiers of government. So the Australian government, the state government, and the local government. But what does Parliament actually do? Well, it makes laws. So the state government can make laws as well. The local government can have regulations like how you monitor your pets and the laws for your pets and things like that. And the state governments makes laws about roads and things like that. Whereas the Australian Parliament makes laws about defence, health, and higher education and things like that. So they make laws. These are then interpreted by the courts. So in the ACT we have the Supreme Court, the Magistrates Court, and the Tribunal. So we've got 3 levels of court, and the different courts do different things. And we do that so that you don't just have people waiting for one particular court. If you've got a minor issue, you can go to the Tribunal. If it's more complicated, you can go to the Magistrates, and then you go to the Supreme Court. Because the other reason why it's good to have 3 courts is because you can then run appeals. So if you don't like the decision in the Tribunal, you can appeal to the Magistrates Court to make a different decision, and then the Supreme Court. And then finally, of course, you can go to the High Court of Australia. Now, we've talked about different terms in relation to the courts. One of them is habeas corpus, which means that the government cannot detain you without you getting access to a court for the third party to be able to make that decision for you. That means we can't just throw people in jail whenever we like. All right, so that's a good thing about being fair and just. So that's a good law to have. The next one is criminal law. So that's where people commit crimes. So that's things like murder or breaking and entering or other crimes like that. And the last one is civil law, and that's when we sue each other. So that's when individuals sue an individual, or an organisation goes up against an organisation, or an individual goes against an organisation. It's not just about suing someone. It could be saying that they're doing something wrong outside of the criminal system. So it's about breaking a civil law or a civil idea. So what happens is when all these courts make all these decisions on all this law, they actually create what's called common law. So when you interpret legislation, it becomes common law, and this is where we have precedent. So precedent is when what was decided yesterday is kind of going to guide what happens tomorrow. The other thing that's good about common law is that you get to, sorry, I keep trying to get my mouse back. The thing about common law that's effective is that it means that the courts can make a decision that's different, or they can interpret the legislation in a slightly different way, in line with what society is after. Through this way, that means that laws can change over time without having to go all the way through Parliament. So they can just change piece by piece and become small changes, and that's what we call common law. Sometimes the changes get so many or they get so big that we actually then go back through the parliamentary process to become legislation. But that takes years, whereas sometimes society changes quicker than that, and that's why common law is quite effective in creating justice and fairness. So hopefully that's kind of a good summary of what we've been through over the last few weeks, and that's helped to clarify a few things.